ever since Donald Trump was elected, Democrats have railed against the Trump tax scam, which is, of course, Donald Trump's tax law that he got passed in 2017. And so now Democrats have promised to try to reverse that legislation, the same one that gave trillions of dollars to the richest Americans and corporations in this country. Suddenly, though, now that the election is pretty near and Joe Biden is looking like he could be the next president of the United States, that there could be a blue wave, now, interestingly enough, congressional Democrats are backing away from raising taxes on the rich. Now, according to The Hill, there's a report here that says that Senate Democrats have suggested that they could move quickly on the issue, but now say they are likely to delay standalone tax legislation if Democratic nominee Joe Biden is elected president and the party controls the House and the Senate. So if we get Biden and a blue wave, here's Democrats going on the record and saying, reverse Trump tax cuts for the rich? Nah, we're not going to do that. No. Now, the article says that their priority would be something else. They say, our priority will be spending on creating jobs and raising wages, investments in green technology and infrastructure, and a national plan to contain coronavirus pandemic. Well, that's all well and good, right? But, you know, anytime any Democrat's going to come up with a plan to do any of that stuff, the immediate question is, well, how are you going to pay for it? I mean, that's the question we constantly heard during the primaries whenever Bernie Sanders or any other politician brought up a plan. Mainly it was, of course, Bernie Sanders with the most ambitious plans, but they were asked over and over, how are you going to pay for it? 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 It's a constant refrain, constant. And so, well, one idea is to reverse the Trump tax cuts, which I thought pretty much all Democrats agreed with, right? Even if they, don't go the Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren route of introducing a wealth tax, which is immensely popular with the American people, by the way. At least you could reverse the Trump tax cuts and bring us back to the Obama-era taxes, which, again, taxed higher earners and corporations a little bit more than they have now. In fact, our corporate tax rate was 28%. Now it's 21% under Donald Trump. And in some cases, effectively nothing for companies like Amazon, for example. And so, I mean, okay, how are you going to do these things then if you're going to constantly be screamed at by Republicans who are already starting to talk about this in the guise of course, coronavirus relief or I should say in the context of coronavirus relief in the guise of, but what about the deficit? We got to do something about the debt and the deficit. You don't understand. That's why we can't help the American people, even though we gave trillions of dollars to the banks and largest corporations in our, coronavirus relief bill, the CARES Act. Well, that fight is going to begin very soon, in which I do believe Democrats will fold. Because it's happened every time. Every time the Republicans bring it up, and say, look at the deficit. We can't obviously do new spending. And we, of course, can't raise taxes. So we're just going to have to cut. We're going to have to do more austerity. And that's when, of course, Democrats say, oh, yes, sir. Well, that's exactly what we're going to have to do. And look, there's a reason, right? It's not just because Democrats are terrible at politics, which I'm going to say they are in general, right? Democratic politicians, terrible at politics. But also because many of the people who are Democratic politicians are wealthy themselves and would see their own taxes go up if the Trump tax cuts were reversed. In fact, one of them is Dianne Feinstein. Dianne Feinstein said this, quote, I think we ought to make the decision when we have a better sense of where the economy is going. There's an element of truth to the argument that policymakers shouldn't raise taxes during a recession. Now, look, you shouldn't raise taxes on working Americans, right? On the middle class, on the working class, okay? And so I would agree with that in that context. But the rich, you understand, the rich have actually made a lot of money during this pandemic. The top 20% are doing fantastic. And so they actually have way more wealth than the rest of the country. In fact, the top 1% holds more wealth than the middle class. They own 29% of the wealth, of the $25 trillion of household wealth back in 2016. Probably more now, judging by the way things have gone, especially during the recession when you now have 40 million people that have, lost their jobs or unemployed. A lot of small businesses have closed, but you had big businesses like, for example, Amazon and others, and Zoom, making billions of dollars. Billions. I mean, this pandemic has increased the already really, really high levels of economic inequality. But now, of course, Dianne Feinstein, oh man, we got to see where the economy is before we even consider raising taxes on myself, is what it is, because she is a multi-millionaire. And so, yes, she would see those tax increases, and obviously she's not in favor of that. But then you've got Senator Debbie Stabenow. She's a member of the Senate Finance Committee. And of course, she's one of the biggest allies of Chuck Schumer, so she's an establishment Democrat. She said, quote, she has no idea when the Democrats would move a tax package next year if they win control of the White House and Senate and keep the House. Quote, we have so much on our plate. We've got to deal with COVID and testing. We need to put in place a whole thing to get our arms around the virus, and a Recovery Act. Now, a Recovery Act, which, if it's like other Democratic bills in recessions that we've seen before, would massively give just about 99% of all the aid to corporations and the very wealthy. She did say, though, I'm sure a tax piece will be in there somewhere, but number one priority will be COVID. Now, look, again, that's really important, right? Yes, dealing with COVID. You can also, deal with COVID and just reverse the Trump tax cuts. It's not like it's really difficult, right? You just go in and you say, oh, Trump Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, gone, repealed, reversed. All right, next order of business, COVID-19. Now we've got more tax revenue projected to come in, and now we can better handle this. Let's do it. They're not doing that, though. No. They say, we're just too busy to do that. We might get to it, but I'm not going to rush it. I mean, who cares if Amazon makes more money, without paying more taxes or any in taxes? Who cares? But it gets worse. Chris Coons, who's a senator from Delaware, is a Democrat. He's also a prominent ally of Joe Biden. When he was asked about this, his response was laughing out loud and saying, look, if Joe Biden is successful in being elected the next president, it will be because we're in the middle of three crises at the same time: a pandemic, a recession, and a renewed focus on racial inequality. He will have the challenge and the mandate to address some of those, but not taxes, but not increasing taxes on the very wealthy and corporations by reversing the Trump tax cuts. Again, which the vast majority of 83% went to the very richest corporations. Now, look, they're talking about, of course, the salt tax, right? Which, of course, Donald Trump got rid of the salt exemption. And look, that primarily does affect places like California and New York. So that's part of their priority, and I'm fine with that. But why are they not just going to repeal the Trump tax cuts? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. But actually it does when you look at how much money Chris Coons and some of these other Democrats have. He's an incredibly wealthy Democrat, and what he's doing is he's laughing in your face. Look, we've got massive economic inequality. People cannot afford their bills. The Democrats can't even muster up the courage to tax the richest people in the world in order to reduce those levels of inequality. They just can't do it. All they're doing is, ironically, they're helping Republicans. That Republican argument that we need to introduce more austerity now, and that we cannot do things like Medicare for all. We cannot do things like a Green New Deal, despite the fact that California is literally on fire right now. But they'll say this: Oh, we just can't afford it. We just can't afford it. Look at how much debt and we have, and that's why, ironically, we can't raise more revenue through increasing taxes. They're giving cover to Republicans. It's insanity. And by the way, Republicans, they're lying about Joe Biden's tax plan. They're going to call it socialism, right? And you want to know what it does? Well, let me go through some of the details. Freudian slip here. Biden's tax plan raises the top income tax rate on individuals from 37 to 39.6%. Ooh, wow, scary socialism, right? And subjects earnings over $400,000 to Social Security payroll taxes and taxes capital gains at the same rate as other income for people making over $1 million. It also raises the corporate tax rate from 21 to 28%, less than Obama's tax rate for corporations, and increases taxes on foreign profits. And what that is that it's very minor. It's pretty milquetoast, okay? And now it might not even happen. It's amazing. It's amazing. Now, one more thing. There's a comment here from Jim Kessler. Now, Kessler is a former Schumer aide who now serves as executive vice president for policy at Third Way. So you guys know who Third Way is. They're a Democrat, a centrist Democrat think tank, right? Now, he said, quote, "I expect at some point there's going to be an increase in taxes to pay for it. I just don't know when in the order it's going to be. They'll look at where the economy is in that moment and what needs to be done, and it will be to pay for certain things." Here's the thing, okay? When you're dealing with the top 20%, and especially the top 1%, the economy's never been better for them. And this is at a time where 40 million, like I said, are unemployed. Millions have lost their health insurance. They can't afford it. The food banks, lines have stretched around blocks for miles for food banks in some instances. And yet, Amazon, Jeff Bezos, as well as other, billionaires, corporations, made $637 billion during the pandemic. Profits have exploded. And yet, these idiots at Third Way, they're like, we have to see where the economy is before we even consider raising taxes on the people that just made $637 billion in a pandemic. But look, this isn't an accident. It's the donors. It's the donors and the politicians who are so disconnected from regular people, i.e. Nancy Pelosi and her fancy ice cream. Those people, again, a tax on the rich would be a tax on them because they are rich. And so it would also be a tax on the people who fund their campaigns, who write the campaign checks. And that's why they're not going to do this. That's why they're backing off. And it's because of the corruption. Our government has been captured by the donors. And now if we ever want to get anything good for the American people, like, for example, universal health care, we've got to end that corruption. We've got to get the money out of politics and elect progressives who do not serve the donors, but who actually serve human beings. Look, I'm not saying that we should let Donald Trump win, right? I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that we've got to end the corruption. We've got to, target the donors and, target it with, like, our demands, maybe like an amendment or something like that at the Constitution to be able to divorce the donors from the political process and get the money and get that corruption out of our government so that we can actually have it back so it can serve us again.